Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Welcome everyone. Today we're going to have a special treat. We're going to do what we should have done in the first talk, which is define for people, because people love definitions nowadays. We'll define, I don't necessarily myself, but we'll define Sufism today and tell you a little bit about it to orient people who know nothing about this. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who don't know about Sufism. It's kind of amazing. When I ask in the public, very, very few people know about it. And if they know anything about it, it's they know about Jalaluddin Rumi and his poetry and his whirling dervishes. That's all they know about it. This is a long-term effect of Wahhabi propaganda, but we'll get into that at some point in time. But Sufism is not well known enough. Before we start, however, I like to give people links, places where they can research the subject, and so they can continue on from the talk. And there are many things written about Sufism, but the three that I like most are the following. The first one, can we see that clearly? Yeah. The first one is called What is Sufism? And you won't believe it, but it's published by the Tony Blair Foundation. Yes, Tony Blair, who was one of the instrumental people in the invasion of Iraq, has now gotten into Sufism as a way of combating extremism in Islam. And I think on that level he's right. So their foundation put out a paper on defining Sufism and its essential characteristics. I don't know anything better than this paper to give you a brief resume. You can download it, Tony Blair Foundation. You can download it. It's about 8-9 pages, and it gives you the whole story in one shot. If you want to get into a little bit more details, there's a few books out. There's many books out. One that I wouldn't recommend is Martin Lings's book. Martin Lings wrote a wonderful biography of the Prophet, but a terrible description of Sufism in What is Sufism, full of all kinds of perennial gobbledygook, abstract concepts, etc. If you happen to have that book, or you're caught with it, or you want to take a chance, the first chapter is actually really good, but it isn't written by him. It's written by the French doctor of Ahmed al-Alawi, translated into English. It's a brilliant chapter, so the book is worth it just for that chapter. Beautiful chapter on Ahmed al-Alawi, one of our great shiukhs. Okay, so Tony Blair Foundation. Then there's Victor Danner. He is the translator of the Hikmah of Ibn Ata'illah. Can you see that? Okay, it's called The Islamic Tradition, and there's a whole chapter, very well written, a little intellectual, but we have to forgive him. He's part of the Mariamiyah. He was a professor at the University of Bloomington. May Allah forgive him. But he writes very well, and there's a whole chapter on Sufism. Number 2 reference, Victor Danner. And number 3, this is probably the first book I read on Sufism, and my colleague Hadi appreciates it a lot also, called Muslim Saints and Mystics, which are stories of some of the great Sufis, short biographies of many of the great Sufis of our tradition. Okay, so those are your references. Tony Blair, Victor Danner, and Farid Dedin Attar is the author of Muslim Saints and Mystics, a great Persian Sufi. So what is this Sufism that I talk so much about and people know so little about? Okay, I'm going to start with a kind of radical statement. People who know me know how moderate I am, but I'm going to be radical in this context and say that Sufism, and this I believe, is the highest order of human activity possible. Wow. Why is that? Because it consists of two elements. One is a process for attaining the experiential knowledge, the lived experience knowledge of God. And two, it's a formula for character development and perfection. Just as the Prophet of Islam, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, told us that he was sent to perfect character, Sufism is one of the best ways to perfect character, if you work at it. Now there are other spiritual traditions who do this, who give you the experiential knowledge of absolute consciousness, of divine consciousness, and work on character. For example, Buddhism, some forms of yoga, some forms of Sikhism. But what is special about Sufism is the balance. It's the most balanced way, spiritual way. Why? Because we have the model of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The model of the Prophet is someone who was involved in the material world as well as the spiritual practice. He was married. He dealt in commerce at some point in time. He had to deal with state governance. He had to deal with people of all kinds. He had children. He had colleagues. He was a supremely well-balanced man. Okay, so he's our example. By contrast, in Buddhism, you have the Buddha who left his family, who left his children, who was a monk, a celibate, ascetic monk for the rest of his life. Not an example that most of us can follow. Jesus, as far as we know, was not married, and he was also celibate to some extent. So, his experience within the realm of family, etc., is limited in that sense, except what he might have learned from the family around him. So Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the most balanced model, and you can check me out on that. If you find any other examples, by all means, comment at the bottom of this session. So Sufism is the highest level of attainment and the most balanced way of reaching that attainment. Okay. Now, we will quote from Tony Blair, if you want academic definition of Sufism. That was how can I say it?
Personal definition?
No, it wasn't personal. It was laudatory, if you want, which is the right word. Some people would say idealized definition of Sufism, but I do idealize Sufism. One of the few things I idealize in this world is Sufism. But if we want a more kind of academic, neutral, scientific, hate that word, scientific definition of Sufism, let's count on Tony Blair and his colleagues. And he says the following: Sufism may best be described as Islamic mysticism or asceticism, which through belief and practice helps Muslims attain nearness to Allah by way of direct personal experience of God. Okay, we talked about the experiential aspect. Well, there are other suggested origins of the term Sufi. Yeah, that's one thing the academics and the ulama love to debate, where the term comes from. Sufi, is it related to the wool of the original dervishes? Is it related to Akh al-Sufa, the people of the bench around the time of Muhammad? Is it related to Safi, which means purity? This is all intellectual abstraction. We're not interested in those kind of distinctions. The Sufi is a mystic. Okay? He believes in pursuing a path that leads to closeness with God, ultimately through encountering the divine in the hereafter as a fundamental component of Islamic belief. Far from being minority articulations, Sufi orders and Sufi-inspired organizations can be found throughout the Muslim world. That was always true, very true. If you look in any Muslim society, there are Sufi orders. But since the advent of Wahhabism, we'll have to do a whole talk on Wahhabism and what happened after the First World War. But the Wahhabis are of Saudi Arabia, who came into power in the Islamic world after World War I. They are very anti-Sufi, anti-spiritual, anti-internal experience. There are people of the outer, and they have been criticizing and denouncing Sufism since they came into power in the Islamic world in the 1920s. And we find the effect of this everywhere we look. Every mosque in every country of the Islamic world that I've been to has some of the propaganda of the Wahhabis internalized in the people. And when you say Sufi, they say, oh, wait a minute, Sufis, they're people of bid'ah, people of shirk, people of kufr. Sheikh Nazim used to say, oh, we should put kufr here. Shirk, bid'ah, and kufr. Sheikh Nazim used to say, the Wahhabis have only... Can you see?
Yes.
Okay. The Wahhabis have only 3 terms in their lexicon. Kufr, shirk, and bid'ah. These are the people who are oppressing the Sufis. I will try. Kufr means disbelief. So if you stand up together and say the name of Allah, of God, together in a group, you're a kufr. You're a disbeliever. Wala hawla wala quwwata. Very odd idea. All the religions have these collective chanting, but if you do it from the Wahhabi point of view, you're in kufr. Shirk means idolatry. Now, at some point, if people go, really radical enough about their shuyukh, about their teachers, it does come close to shirk, but there's no shirk in essential Sufism. And then bid'ah means literally origination. So anything you change in the religion is considered haram to change it, although there's a huge debate about that. And we're now in the season of Mawlid and people, which is celebrating the birth of the Prophet, and some people consider it bid'ah, and other people consider it not bid'ah, and others say it's bid'ah hasana, a good bid'ah. So this is just, bid'ah means changing the religion. Bottom line, the Sufis don't change the religion at all. The real Sufis. They add to it with various practices. So the Sufis have been there from the beginning, we believe. The term wasn't used until the 3rd or 4th generation of Islam, but they've been there ever since. And we will mention today some of the more well-known people in Sufism, names and short history. We'll probably end up spending a session on each of these people. These are grand in Sufism. Oh, that's another word. We talk about awliya. What are awliya, Hadi?
The saints.
The saints. Literally from wali, meaning the friend of God. The awliya. And the Sufis pay a lot of attention to awliya. So who are some of our awliya? Well, probably the best known one is Jalaluddin Rumi. He's known for his Mathnawi, 3 volumes now in English. Anyway, in Persian, I don't know how many volumes, but it's a long poem which is an ode to the divine. Now, people know Jalaluddin Rumi mostly because of the whirling dervishes, because he developed a practice that they called sama, where they turn around in circles and amazingly never get dizzy. And this is one of the techniques. It's a kind of like meditation in movement. And people who've seen it with the musical background, it's very beautiful. So this is one of the ways he's best known. The other way he's known is through the story of how he became a Sufi. Many people know about this story. Who was his teacher?
I can't remember.
Shams Tabriz was the teacher. They lived near in Konya in Turkey, and there's a beautiful maqam there. But the iconic story is the following. Jalaluddin Rumi used to travel around the country giving teachings, but he used to carry all his books on a bunch of donkeys that followed him as he was traveling. Boy, the times have changed. No Google then, no internet, nothing. and he carried all his books with him. He wasn't the only one who did that. And so he came across this darvish, real darvish ascetic named Shams Tabriz, and Shams saw him, and at that time he had a lot of followers, because he was a great scholar, Jalaluddin Rumi. It seems Shams Tabriz was also a scholar, but at this point he was mostly a mystic. He takes all his books from the backpacks on the donkeys and throws them into the well. And Jalaluddin Rumi is just stunned, would be the word, abasourdi in French. He's stunned by this action. And he says, what's going on? And Shams says to him, this is artificial knowledge. This is dry knowledge. If you want the real knowledge, then leave those books and follow me. If you want to keep on your way of being studious and academic, he said, I can bring all these books out of the water untouched. And that's the start of his spiritual journey for Jalaluddin Rumi. Okay, many iconic stories in Sufism. Sufism is full of stories, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. The other, possibly the second best well-known Sufi is Muhyiddin Ibn al-Arabi. I spent time with my family not far from his tomb in Damascus. And the mosque was called the Mosque of Sheikh Muhyiddin, the great Ibn al-Arabi. Now, Ibn al-Arabi was known somewhat in the West also as being a great philosopher at the same time. And he was in the era of Andalusia, and he had met some of the great scholars of Andalusia, including Averroes, he's called Ibn Rushd, who recognized immediately that Ibn al-Arabi was in a higher state than him. He was a great mystic and philosopher, etc. And he's known for his writings as well. One of the best known books is called Futuhat al-Makkiyah, which is openings, spiritual states he had on Makkiyah in Mecca. When he was there, he spent several years there in Mecca and wrote that book, Futuhat al-Makkiyah.
I believe in English it's translated as the Meccan Revelations.
The Meccan Revelations, okay. Well, Futuhat is a kind of, Fat is an opening, so he had all kinds of openings there. If we say revelation, people may think he was claiming to be a prophet, which he wasn't. But he was claiming to be the head of the Mohammedan saints. So we're back to the Awliya, one of the great Awliya. Another Sufi, obviously we won't have time to cover many of them today, but if you have a look at the book, Muslim Saints and Mystics, many of these, if not all of them, are covered there. So you can have a look at that book. Abu Bayezid Bastami is one of the great ecstatics of the Islamic tradition. And probably he's best known for the story of him going to the heavens. And each time he gets to the door of the heaven, when the angel asks him, who is there? And he said, it's Abu Bayezid Bastami, and he gets refused. Until finally he realizes what it's all about, and he says essentially to Allah, there is only you. There's no Abu Bayezid anymore. There's only you. And then he's allowed in. Okay, this is the beginning of the idea of fana, annihilation. Fana and baka. Fana is the annihilation of the individual ego, and baka is the remaining of the absolute ego, the absolute consciousness, which is Allah, remains after the individual is annihilated. And that is the ultimate stage that we aim for in Sufism. Somewhat parallel to the idea of enlightenment in Buddhism and Hinduism, and maybe Christ consciousness in the Christian mystical path. So that's Abu Bayezid Bastami. There's a book written of his biography by a college teacher here in Montreal. It's a nice book if you want to get it. The name doesn't, do you remember the name? No. Anyway, there's a book, a biography of Abu Bayezid Bastami in there, but there's a short biography in Muslim Saints and Mystics. Okay, we have to include the women saints. There were many women saints, by the way, for those who are concerned about the gender issue. As far as I know, astaghfirullah, there were no transgender saints, alhamdulillah. But there were many, many women saints, and the best known one was Rabia al-Adwiya from Basra in Iraq. And the iconic story of Rabia al-Adwiya, I've told it a few times, but it always bears repeating, was Rabia was young, beautiful, intelligent, and so she had a lot of proposals in marriage. And one of them was from one of the prominent people at the time, who was also very pious, who was wealthy, who was intelligent, who had good character. It might have been Hassan al-Basri, I have to check it. But she had a very good candidate, and she said, I'll think about it, and she refused. And they said, why would you refuse? This is the perfect match. This is your twin soul, as they say in modern parlance. And she said, no, I can't do it. And they said, why? And she said, anytime I love anything other than Allah, He sends me a test in that area. So she didn't want to repeat the Romeo and Juliet story where they end up both of them deceased because of their love for each other. So there's a very deep lesson in that, which is that, and it's the same as the one in the Bible that says, thou shalt love thy Lord thy God with all thy heart, all thy soul, and all thy mind. So it means Allah is supposed to be the first priority. Not your spouse, not your children, not your job, not your money, not even your stock portfolio. Allah is supposed to be the first in your priorities. Okay. And the last one I wanted to mention here, which is the tariqat I've spent perhaps the most time on, perhaps a little bit more even than the Naqshbandis, are the Shadalis and Abu Hassan al-Shadali. I visited the maqam of Ibn Mashish, where Abu Hassan al-Shadali took his original bayat. We didn't mention bayat here. Bayat is taking the hand of the teacher. So Abu Hassan al-Shadali crosses from the Maghrib. It's in the Maghrib? No, I think actually he went all the way from Andalusia to Iraq, which was the end of the Islamic world at the time. And he gets there to the far eastern end of the Islamic world, and he meets a great wali, another awliya, who said, you're mistaken, your sheikh is back near your hometown. There's an interesting message for people who keep changing locations all the time. Your sheikh is back home, right near where you were born. So he goes all the way back, and in this case it's in Morocco, I guess, that he originates. Goes all the way back, meets Ibn Mashish, and Ibn Mashish, a great wali in his own name, he tells him, you're not ready, go down. We went to visit that Jebel Alam, where Ibn Mashish is buried. He says, go down and do ghusl, and then you can come back. Ghusl means the big ablution, not wudu, a full shower. Go down, take a full shower, and come back. And he does this 3 times, and finally he says, okay, you're ready. Now, there's a lot of interpretations about what this means, but as far as I can make out, it's the same story as Jalaluddin Rumi. It means you have to get rid of all the intellectual, academic knowledge you have about Islam and clear your mind of everything. وَكُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانِيًا. Annihilate everything in your mind and be open to the presence of Allah. And then he gets his first enlightenment fana experience, and then he's sent off to Tunisia, actually, which you can visit outside of Tunis, the place where Abu Hassan al-Shadali did a 7-year retreat there to complete his spiritual education. So those are some of the stories. Obviously, as Sheikh Nazim would say, Sufism is a huge ocean, and so we're just putting our toes into the water today, and we will continue exploring this week by week. But before I finish today, I'd just like to go over a little bit of the terminology of Sufism, and then I'll let the people who are watching do a little bit more research, and we'll continue exploring all of these subjects over the next weeks and months, inshallah. So we covered kufr means disbelief, and it's not something a term we should be abusing like the Wahhabis, but it means real disbelief, and so I guess we could put the atheists and agnostics in that camp from an Islamic point of view. Kufr means burying the truth. Shirk is idolatry. We have all kinds of idolatry nowadays. Probably one of the principal idolatries nowadays is science and scientism. People take it as a god. And bid'ah means origination, but it means distorting, perverting the original tradition into something else. So we don't want to go there, but bid'ah, adding new practices is not necessarily a bad thing. And there was a statement of one of the great leaders of Islam, Omar ibn Khattab, which says there's also bid'ah hasana, good bid'ah. So bid'ah doesn't mean bad necessarily. Awliya are the saints in our tradition. Sufi we've talked about. Bayat is taking the hand, although there's less and less of it nowadays, and there's some shuyukh who say people can't handle taking the hand because it implies a submission of the ego that they're not capable of. Then we have dhikr, which is the basic practice, remembrance of God. The leader in the tradition, I guess what the term most people would know is guru. Well, there's no guru in Islam per se, but there are sheikhs or shuyukhs. Murshid, the one who leads the way, or Pir, which is used a lot in the Indian subcontinent. My first teacher was Pir, Vilayat Khan, so that's another name used for guru. The name used for disciple is murid, literally from the Arabic word wanting, so they want the truth. The tariqat is the way or the name of the group. And in Islam and in Sufism, we have a number of tariqats. The ones I've been most involved with are the Naqshbandi tariqat, like with Sheikh Nazim, and the Shadali tariqat with Sheikh Nu and Sheikh Abu Qasim, and there are the Chisti tariqat, as a lot of people in India follow it. The Hadrat is the collective meditation practice, sometimes known as zikr, sometimes known as sama. We call it wisal, actually, meaning connection. We're trying to connect wisal. So we try from usul to connect. This is our connection with the divinity. And finally, we have the state of enlightenment, which in Arabic is called fana and baka, the annihilation of the ego. So I hope that gives people a good overview in a short period of time. We'll be elaborating on all of these subjects in future sessions, inshallah. If you have any questions, comments, please include them on the YouTube station, and we'll be in touch, inshallah. I hope this has given you some basic orientation towards Sufism. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, salamun Al-Fatiha. We always ask, just a PS here, in our dua, we always ask, oh Allah, keep us on the straight path. In other words, keep us in good behavior and keep us on the path of ascendancy. Help us to keep getting closer and closer to the Divine Presence, its light, its love, its peace. Inshallah, we ask Allah to help us in all of these ways. Ameen, ameen, ya Rabbil Alameen. Alhamdulillah.